And just quickly, this is one of my cats. I can't see. Where is she? I can't see what's being shown here because of the camera. But can you see? Right, what's that down there? Anyway, that's Pinkie Pie. Hey, Pinkie Pie. Pinkie Pie. And this is Mishka over there. One, two cats, just to show you I'm an animal lover. I'm a pacifist. If they call me to war, I wouldn't go. You know, if someone came to my house and tried to, hurt my family or whatever, I'll go to war for that, but not for all these guys. World War One and World War Two shouldn't have happened. So anyway, this is part 2. I've got to finish with the Pinnacle of Things. And yes, I jump around. That's what I do. Now the lighting is heaps darker, but that's okay. It is what it is. Everything happens for a reason. Yeah, so the Pinnacle of Things. We've got all the roses. We want to designate the biggest rose ever down to the smallest one. And there's not enough even plank units to be able to do that. But that's why I say I've thought of like the micro plank and the nano plank. Micro's what's smaller? Yeah, nano's smaller than micro. So you got the plank unit, then a micro plank, nano plank. We just need the measuring device to look at it. So let's just say we had a measuring device to measure every size of rose flower that's ever been, because this is the pinnacle of things I'm telling you here, which is needed to, I feel, be explained right up front, because it gives me this I only came up with a few years ago, thought about it, and it gives me an avenue for me to be able to get across to you who my family is and who I am especially. And I'll just continue. So the pinnacle of things. So the biggest rose flower down to the smallest, we can put them on a sliding scale, because no two things in the universe are exactly the same. Because if two things were exactly the same in the universe, then everything would be exactly the same, and therefore everything would cancel out, essentially, and nothing would exist. So that's nothing, and that's once upon a time what God was. He was nothing. There was nothing. There was no contrast. So he or it or she didn't even know it existed. There was just nothing. It's a concept that is hard to, it's not hard to realize, but yeah, it's just because I understand about this nothing and it turned into something and numbers were created when it happened, and that the pinnacle of things, and then just that no two things in the universe can be the same, or in the all of all existence can be the same. Like, it's amazing. Like, you'll see within people certain signatures of similarity, which has got to do with frequency and the vibration of the person. But, out of all the people that's ever been, there are no two people. Well, there's twins, identical twins, and they look sort of similar. But if you looked at their body structure, one would have a bigger heart, other one a smaller heart, different abilities, different characteristics, but they sort of look the same, but essentially they're not exactly the same. I had a friend when I told him sort of two things in the universe can't be the same. There are no two things in the universe the same. He just said to me, what about twins? They're exactly the same. I'm like, come on, dude. Anyway, so you got the biggest, we've got the measuring device to the biggest rose down to the smallest rose on what I call the sliding scale. If we had the measuring device, each one of those vibrates at a certain thing, and there'll be a signature in the vibration that equates to the size it is down to the small size. So we've discovered the pinnacle of things for the biggest to the smallest. Then you could put, for all the rose flowers, you could put other characteristics you wanted to find, like the ones with the most smell, to the least perfume smell. And you could measure that if you had the measuring device. Okay, and you could go through all the characteristics of the rose flower. What else would there be? Strength, just whatever you can think of. Colour, this or that. then you could actually, if you got all or as many of characteristics as we can think of, you could find the overall best rose flower down to the most sort of perfect rose flower, if that makes sense, or the most average, with all the characteristics, if they had a number and then you added them up and divided by how many characteristics there were, you'd get the average. And that would be the pinnacle rose flower. And then that would go down then with all the characteristics, maybe 500 different characteristics that you measured, and then got all those values and put them together and then divide it by however many characteristics, then you'd have the overall average. You'd have the overall best rose flower all the way down to sort of the worst performing rose flower. Now, let's transpose what I'm saying to people. And now people will have a hard time dealing with, I think, what I'm going to say. But essentially, there is the best person walking around that's ever existed. They either existed before, back in time and they died, or they're living right now, or they'll be born in the future. So you could get all the characteristics you can think of: height, strength, brain power, skill, whatever it is, and you could find out who is the pinnacle person. And so what I sort of say is that, like, God is perfect or pinnacle in itself, and every person is a pinnacle too. Every person is a pinnacle. Every animal is a pinnacle. Every point of reference is a pinnacle of itself. That's all it can be. But no two things in the universe are the same. We have the sliding scale, so there's going to be better to worse. It's just how it is. So when they turn around and they say, all people are equal, well, no, not really. All people are not equal. That's, to me, a ridiculous thing to say, to dispel, that's like how they don't let kids playing sport have a winner. Both teams win. Why? A better team's a better team. They won. They kicked more goals in AFL or whatever it is than the other team. Why does both teams have to win? Because they want to take away the fact that we all are different and there is a hierarchy. And, that my argument, my thought experiment here, it works and it's true. And I'm going to have a think for a second. Yeah, I don't know what I was talking about just then, but the pinnacle of things. And so they sort of say everybody's equal or whatnot. No, they're not. But what we should say is everybody should be treated equally. Okay? And even that's sort of not possible. But when you meet somebody else, it doesn't matter whether they're better than you or this or that. You just, or worse or that, you just treat them with respect because everybody deserves to be treated equally. If you go and mess up and hurt other people or do bullshit, then, maybe you shouldn't be treated equally, sort of thing. But in essence, everything is just as in the universe and all existence is just as important as everything else. Because if you took one atom away, this whole thing would collapse. Everybody, the way anything's configured right now is only because of everything and situation and event and whatever that happened in every other now since the beginning of time, since the Big Bang went off. So everything's needed, everything's just as important as everything else, but not everything is equal. And so you could transpose my pinnacle of things argument to the pinnacle person. Like in one family, that's one group. So you've got your mum, your dad, and the kids. Now, out of those 5 people, one of those people is going to be the pinnacle person of that unit, of that group of things. All the roses, there's a pinnacle rose. Best smelling, best whatever, all averaged out the best. So quite often the pinnacle of a family gets ostracized and called the black sheep or whatever because the rest of them can never beat that pinnacle one, and people get jealous about that because we all have what I explained before. We're all the center of the universe, so we all have a bit of a complex that we're the best. Our ego sort of does that, and people don't want to stand back and acknowledge that someone else is better than them, because it shows them what they are not and what they're trying to be, and they get pissed off with that and whatever. And there's tall poppy syndrome. I think that's where that comes from. Where they try and pull down the best and find any fault they can within the best one, so that they can pull them down and feel better about themselves, because that one that's the best doesn't exist anymore because they've been fucked over and blah, 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 blah. And that's a bit of a problem with ego. But, yeah, there just is, within the family, there's a pinnacle. Then within the family, the mum and dad's brothers and sisters and their families, there's another group. Okay, and there's still going to be a pinnacle within them out of that, and it's just the way it is. Yeah, and so where do I want to go next? I don't know. I'll just pause again. So I just want to say that right now there's one person walking around on the planet that, if we had a measuring device, and it's probably written in our DNA actually, and to do with our family lines, because there's a pinnacle family line as well. And there's probably 2 pinnacle family lines that the husband and wife came together, and they might have been the most opposite things, because there's another thing I like to say, that the universe, or all existence, would rather put the most different things together than the most similar things together. And we could use that in, say, ancestral families, that if you mix with each, if one family keeps mixing with each other, problems arise, because the universe wants the most extremes to go together, because it's sort of the best. And so, so anyway, that's just my pinnacle of things argument, or postulate, or theory, which will become maybe more evident later on why I've sort of explained that. Okay, now what I wanted to go on to, what I thought about, is what is God? I remember when, does God exist? And so I remember when I was in maybe about grade 3, and I had this friend, Andrew Hillman, and they'll come up a bit later when I had my first episode, my first schizophrenic sort of episode. And my mum had postnatal depression after my elder sister, who's 12 and a half years older than me, was born first. Mum got postnatal depression, and that turned into schizophrenia. Then my other sister, who's 9 years older than me, and I think I said, I was born in 1979. I'm 46 years old. My other sister Tara, she gets mentally ill as well, so my mum and that, and I just get it if I smoke marijuana and don't have medication. And that there's a reason, just when I get more of this story told, the bits will come together, and you'll see why I spoke about this or spoke about that. And so this guy, his mum was an emergency teacher, so my teacher was away that day. And they were Christian, and even I remember being at his house, and we'd sing songs like Father Abraham had many sons had Father Abraham, and I am one of them, and so are you, so let's all something blah blah blah. Anyway, so back then, I guess you could sneak in some religious sort of things, being the emergency teacher, if you wanted to. If it happened today, it'd probably be sort of an uproar, and maybe with the mix of different cultures in Australia now, it just wouldn't fly. But so she taught us, and she snuck in some of her Christianisms and whatever, and that was the first time. So I must have been 6, 7, maybe 7, 8 years old or something like that. Yeah, and it's the first time I'd sort of heard about God or whatever, and that I remember anyway. And then I thought to myself, I've got to go tell the most intelligent person that I know about this, and ask, so what's this God thing? And that's my father. And so I got home and waited for him to get back from work, and I said, "Oh, Dad, what's this God thing? What do you think about God? Like, what?" And he was like, "Oh," he was an atheist, and he's like, "Oh, I don't believe in God," or whatever. And I think he sort of said to me, okay, Warwick, so where's God? Where's whatever? And I thought to myself for a second, and because this is poignant for the whole story, I just sort of went, well, after thinking for a few seconds, oh, God is everywhere. Everything added together, everything's God. God's everywhere. And so essentially, that's exactly what God is. The all of all existence is God. And if we could stand outside of it and have that measuring device I was talking about to get its vibration, what I thought a few years later, maybe when I was 16 or something like that, I thought to myself, and I'd learnt or come across the golden ratio or the divine proportion, which is in our DNA, which is in our sections of finger where you've got sort of a knuckle or whatever, where it bends from there to there to there, is the golden ratio, 1.618. And we're made in the likeness of God, I'd also heard. So I reckon that if you added everything up together, and even the fact that it's called the divine proportion, if you added everything up together, if that was possible, again, this is just a thought experiment, so nobody can actually tell me what I'm saying is not right, and that's convenient for myself. But I reckon, because it can't be one, and I'll explain that in a minute. And so I reckon if you had a measuring device could stand outside of the all of all existence, which is impossible, this is just a thought experiment, and you measured the frequency of everything, well, that's God. And frequency can add up to a number. A number could be spat out from that to represent what that thing is. Anything. In the infinite PORs, point of references, that are all the center of everything, if you had the measuring device, you could measure its frequency and that could spit out to a number. And so God is just everything, I thought. And one tick. Yeah, and that its frequency, if measured, would be 1.618. And that's a number and a ratio, or the golden ratio, the divine proportion. It's something that is intrinsic within existence. Even buildings and stuff like that have been, the golden ratio has been used. Our bodies have it, even with how our faces are sort of, I think, to there and then to here or something. Just the golden ratio is all over the place. Yeah, and I just thought, and even this is got something to do. And Fibonacci, the Fibonacci sequence, 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, 8 plus 5 is 13. The Fibonacci sequence has to do with the golden ratio. Somehow, the further you go along, the more closer to the actual, and the golden ratio is I thought it was called reciprocal. It's a reciprocal number, but anyway, it goes on forever and ever, just like pi, 3.14 goes on for infinity. And so I think even this shape here, this here has to do with the golden ratio somehow, and see how it turns into an actually a spiral, which is interesting. And just a quick side note, if you think to yourself, if pi goes on forever, then when you use pi to work out the circumference of a circle, the answer must go on forever and ever too. So does a circle really exist? Is there a start and finishing point if the answer goes on for infinity? Well, the answer is no. Circles in one way, shape or form do not exist. But we see them on a paper, but even the atoms wouldn't join up from start to finish, even when you printed it. Anyway, that's just another thought. It will click maybe why it relates to everything later on. And so let's just pretend that God, which is everything, vibrates to 1.618, the golden ratio. And now what I'm about to say, relates to it either. Is for me, the number one is the closest thing to perfection, the number that relates most to what perfection is. And almost perfection can't exist, but if you looked at God sort of thing and measured it, maybe we could say he's perfection, but because things do exist, it can't be one. The frequency of everything can't be one. Because if it was, then it'd be just ones and ones and ones and ones together. I don't know. It's hard. I don't know if this makes any sense, and if it comes out as gibberish to you, but you'll get it later on. And so I thought that everything can't be just the number one. That's too perfect. It needs to be something different. So to me, it just made sense that existence and everything is maybe the golden ratio, 1.618. And I don't know where to go with this. I'm a bit lost, but just bear with me. Well, then I think it's poignant for me then to explain how one can't be, because one would be perfect and therefore there'd be nothing. When I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, my dad came up to me and he said, "Oh, Warwick, what is nothing?" Or what if? No, he said, "What if there was perfection? What if there was perfection, sort of thing? What would that mean?" And I don't know what I thought to myself, but I think he ended up saying, "Well, if there was such thing as perfection, there'd be one thing here, which is perfection. Then there'd be another piece of perfection next to it. They'd be exactly the same because they're perfect. They'd be exactly the same. Therefore, they'd cancel each other out. And even if you had other bits of perfection, they'd all cancel each other out because there'd be no contrast because they'd be exactly the same. So therefore, I think what I iterated later on as the years went by, I think I thought to myself, so therefore there would be nothing." Or he sort of told me, I can't remember, so there'd be nothing. So there's no such thing as real perfection. And maybe just everything added up together is God is perfect. God is perfect. But in its perfectness, there's all these bits that add up to it that can only be bits because nothing is actually to the value of one. Because otherwise there'd be no contrast and things would just meld into each other and then there would be nothing because all the bits would be exactly the same. But as we know, and that's why I can say no two things in the universe are the same. And these concepts have entered my life or my brain or whatever, or through others at different times within my life. So again, what I've talked about so far is just a snippet. Try and just accept what I'm saying, that just pretend even that what I'm saying is correct. And later on as you go by, you'll be able to go, oh, that's why that relates to that or this, because this is the way this story works. So it'll take some while. I just hope you remain open and just see what I've got to say, because this is really the greatest story yet to be told. But anyway, that could come across as ego, and I don't want to be like that because people shut off and then whatever. Yeah, and so that's why I can sort of say now that one is the closest thing to perfection that there is in it's a number one. But of course things exist, so it can't be, because what if there was perfection? They'd cancel each other out and therefore there'd be nothing. So I could also sort of say that once upon a time there was nothing. Okay, before there was anything, maybe it was just all black, or it was all white, or it was all grey, or it was just nothing. It wasn't even that. Just think in your mind, what would it be like if there was just absolutely nothing? And nothing, therefore, would be perfection, wouldn't it? Because if there was two bits of perfect together, they'd cancel out and make up nothing because there'd be no contrast. So God, maybe, is sort of nothing, or once upon a time God was there was just nothing and it was perfect. And then I used the idea which came to me a few years ago as well, that once upon a time, even before our Big Bang, there were probably other Big Bangs, and I've even got a theory that the Big Bang went off and it's called the Big Bang timeline, and it expands, like the universe expands, but it'll expand to a point and then come back and retract, and probably time goes backwards and it goes back into its singularity, which was a tiny infinitesimal little dot that had all the mass in it, but it was an equation of the peripherals of how the Big Bang went off, and that's gone off just in the way it's gone off. Has put all the celestial objects exactly where they are, because of the way the Big Bang went off. And if the Big Bang was a little bit different, and over 14.3 billion years or whatever it is, if it was 0.000000001 different, that over 14.3 billion years, our solar system wouldn't exist, the Earth wouldn't exist, or whatever. That's just another concept that's integral in understanding to the overarching story I've got to tell. And so I just one tick, get my thoughts together. I'm pausing this. Yeah, and not even for all intents and purposes, but once upon a time there was just nothing. Okay, there's absolutely nothing. Then all of a sudden we could say nothing, which was God, which was perfect, right? Because nothing is kind of perfect now, the way that I've said it. Two perfects together equals nothing, so therefore that's perfect. And that's sort of God once upon a time. And then all of a sudden one day, there wasn't even one day, there wasn't even in an instant, because it was just nothing. You can't even describe it. And even Dad said to me, what is nothing? And then I sort of said to him, well, you asked the question, what is nothing? So it must be something. But anyway, that's just another mind boggle. So basically there was nothing, that was God, it was perfect. And all of a sudden, which we can't even say, but it just had a thought. And its thought was, what am I? Okay? It thought to itself, what am I? What am I here for? And in thinking that, in that exact same instance, what it did was make a copy of itself, and then numbers were born, because you had nothing, which was 1, which couldn't have been 1, because if you got 1, then you got 2, 3, 3. It's a backwards thing. But an introverted and whatever. And so it was nothing. It thought to itself, what am I? And in trying to answer that question, it made a picture of itself, a copy of itself. But as I've just said, there are no two things in the universe that are exactly the same. So when it made the copy of itself, it was a little bit different. And then that copy looked at, so the nothingness, which then became 1, looked at the other bit that it made, which then was 2, and was basically exactly the same. But again, no two things in the universe are the same. And it looked at it and it said, well, that doesn't answer my question. And then because I'm just looking at myself more or less, even though it's a bit different, so it doesn't answer what am I, then the second one that was made, the copy of the nothing, then thought to itself the exact same thing. What am I? So it made a copy of itself, and no two things in you. So then you had 1, 2, 3, and then those 1, 2, 3 bits couldn't be exactly on top of each other, because if they were, then, well, it just couldn't happen. They'd have to be a slight distance away from each other. So distance was created. God had created form, and time was created because there was distance. So then the third one, then the fourth one, the third one made a copy of itself, but it was a little bit different. And then it's gone on and on and on and on and on and like that for however long it's gone on. And because God is trying to decide or trying to find out what it is. And to find out what it is, it needs to make infinity amounts of different stuff, that each time it makes a different thing. And now over time we have people, we have procreation, we make babies, and that's like 2 bits getting together, 2 opposites getting together, and then making a new piece of this infinitesimal thing that's trying to get to infinity, to understand what it is. And everything that's made allows God to be able to say to itself, well, that's what I'm not. So now I understand a little bit more what I am. I'm not all of those things, and it needs to get there. It's backwards and whatnot, but I hope you can sort of get what I'm saying here. And again, it's just a thought experiment, but this is what I do. This is where my mind leads me through different things, and over time, and other people need to think their things before I can think something new, and the same works for you. Any dynamic I use for myself or for anything I talk about works on the macro to micro, as is above, so is below. works for somebody else exactly the same. Yeah, and so God basically was nothing, then became one thing, and then two, and then three, and four, and it's going through up to infinity, because I reckon there was many, many more Big Bangs, and if not, there's side-by-side Big Bangs going off, but I'll get to actually maybe what the Big Bang actually is later on. But I've got to let you go through the different things that I've been through, not in the same sequence, of course, but we'll get you to it will just help in your ascension, your overall vibration will raise, the Earth's vibration will raise, therefore the universes, therefore everything, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and that's the story more or less of God. It's just making copies and copies and copies and copies, and until we have now all of this difference, and every time there's a new copy, a new thing, it gets closer to understanding what it is not, because it's not that thing. So add up all the things that it's not, and gets it closer to it understanding what it is. And thank God it's infinity is involved, because that means now things will go on forever and ever and ever, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and so there's just another concept that's integral, I think, to this whole thing. And that's how time was made, distance was made. Yeah, numbers came out after that. Numbers are integral to the whole thing. We didn't invent numbers, they're just there. And that proves what I just, in a way, what I said about God, it was nothing, and made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What I was saying, I don't know. Gonna pause this for a second. Yeah, so this video will be finished in a minute or so. So now what I'm going to get into is what I call the Big Bang timeline, which is like the sweet spot or the calculation of what God, or source, I like to call it, because maybe sometimes when we say God, people might, depending on their belief system or what they've been led to believe is sort of the truth through religion or whatnot, when we say God, it might be sort of heated. So I like to, in a way, maybe it's a polarizing way to put it, because some people will believe in God and other people don't, and blah, blah. So I like to call it source, and which again is just everything. So source, because there would have been stuff before this Big Bang, I'm sure of it. And even if it does expand and retract. So the Big Bang timeline, TBBTL, was essentially, this is the concept behind it, that essentially was a calculation of our Big Bang. And that's gone off in a particular way that set off the expansion of the universe, which I'm going to stop this now and make another video. So this was part 2, and part 3 will be on its way shortly.